Have you ever seen a simple community election just completely go off the rails? Today we're diving into a story just like that. It starts with what should have been a routine condo board election and spirals into a full-blown legal war, complete with a chaotic Zoom meeting and a fight for control that had to be settled by a judge.
And that really gets to the heart of it all. It raises this huge question. Can a lawsuit actually decide who wins? Or does it just force everyone to admit who already won? That's the puzzle we're going to piece together today. You see, there were two totally different stories about what happened. One side claimed that two board members were basically installed illegally through some kind of backroom legal deal, totally ignoring what the community wanted. But the other side, they argued no, the lawsuit was the only way to make the board do its job, count the votes, and recognize the real winners.
And this isn't just some hypothetical. This was a real case. A homeowner named Arleen Jouxson took her own condominium association, the villages at Aviano, to court. The stakes couldn't have been higher. We're talking about who was going to control the entire board.
So, how did things get so bad? To really get it, we've got to go back in time to the night of the annual meeting. It was all happening over Zoom on April 13th, 2021. And folks, this is where the whole thing just exploded. Let's just walk through the timeline of that night. So, back in March, the ballots go out. Fast forward to April 13th. At 6:01 p.m., the Zoom meeting starts, and the property manager makes a key announcement. They have a quorum. They have enough votes for a valid election. But then, literally moments later, the board president steps in and moves to postpone the whole thing.
And let's be really clear about that quorum. They didn't just barely make it. No way. The association only needed 40 ballots to be able to hold the election. They had received 191. That is almost 5 times the number they needed. The owners had shown up, they had voted, and their ballots were just sitting there, waiting to be counted.
You can just imagine the chaos on that Zoom call. Members were speaking up, questioning if the board even had the right to do this. But the board president, Tony Bazzioni, he just pushed right through it. And after a pretty tense argument, he just declared it. The meeting was postponed. He shut the whole election down before a single vote was officially counted. And that one move, that's what started the entire legal battle.
So, with the election just stuck, and the members feeling like their votes didn't matter, the fight had to go somewhere else. It moved from a Zoom call into a courtroom. That sudden postponement basically forced the candidates' hands, and it led to a lawsuit that all boiled down to one single question. Did an election actually happen or not?
And this is where one of the candidates on the ballot, a woman named Eloise Figueroa, decided she wasn't going to just let this go. She filed the lawsuit. Her argument was simple. The election was perfectly valid, and the board had a legal responsibility to count the ballots and seat the winners, period.
Okay, so this is really the core of the whole fight. On one hand, you had the petitioner, Ms. Jouxson. Her argument was that since the meeting was postponed, the election was canceled. It was null and void. So the settlement that came later was an illegal power grab by the board to appoint who they wanted. But the association, they saw it totally differently. They said, look, the election was over the second we had enough ballots for a quorum. In their eyes, the settlement didn't appoint anybody. It just forced them to do what they were supposed to do on April 13th all along, count the votes.
And if you look at how it played out, the association argued this was just the proper legal path to get the truth. You can see the key step here is number 3. As part of the settlement, the association itself agrees to finally count those 191 ballots. And when they did, it confirmed that Ms. Figueroa and another candidate, Linda Bahr, had won. So after months of fighting, the whole case finally lands on the desk of an administrative law judge named Thomas Shedden. It was his job to look at all the evidence, all the arguments, and make a final call. This was the moment of truth.
So how did the judge see it? Well, he basically went down a checklist. He found that yes, the election was set up correctly. Yes, the quorum was definitely met. He even said the board acted inappropriately by postponing it. And here's the kicker. He ruled that the ballots didn't just expire. They were still valid. And that meant the settlement wasn't some illegal appointment. It was just a tool used to enforce the results of an election that, for all practical purposes, had already finished.
And this brings up a really important legal idea called the burden of proof. See, the judge's job wasn't just to decide who he thought was right. It's about who could prove their case. The responsibility was on Ms. Jouxson to prove that the board had illegally appointed members. And in the end, the judge decided she just didn't have enough evidence to back up that claim.
And with that, it was over. The judge's final order was clear, direct, and left no room for argument. Ms. Josephson's petition was dismissed. The outcome that was decided through that lawsuit and settlement was now officially valid.
Okay, so that was a pretty wild ride, right? But this story is more than just drama at one condo building. There are some really powerful lessons in here for anyone who lives in or helps run a community association.
So what are the big takeaways here? First, the vote is the election. What the court decided is that once you have enough ballots to meet quorum, the election has happened. The meeting is just a formality. Second, a board's power isn't unlimited. They can't just decide to cancel a valid vote whenever they feel like it. And finally, and this is so important, procedure is power. Following the rules in your bylaws isn't optional. It's what protects a fair, democratic process for absolutely everyone.
And that leaves us with this one last thing to think about. This whole case really suggests that the minute you put your ballot in the box or click submit, you've done your part. The election, in a way, is already over. The results might not be public yet, but the will of the voters has been expressed. It's a pretty powerful idea about where the real authority in any election actually comes from.